Go ahead and get started. Oh, looks like I have to click this. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, my name's Amy Murphy, and I am the new program chair for the League of Women Voters. And I wanted to thank everyone on behalf of the League of Women Voters for joining tonight. And in particular, I want to thank Council members Letty Hardy and Phil Duncan for taking some time out of their busy schedules to join us too. As the new program chair, I'm excited to be kicking things off with a presentation on a topic that there's been a lot of interest in lately, and that's planning and transportation here in Falls Church. So we are privileged tonight to hear from the foremost expert on the topic, Paul Stoddard. Paul has been the planning director for the City of Falls Church since the beginning of 2018. It was a title that was well-deserved and hard-earned since Paul actually worked his way up through the ranks, beginning as an intern in 2012. So as the planning director, Paul is responsible for a variety of functions, not the least of which is to supervise the work of the 9-member planning division, whose goal it is to improve the quality of life here in Falls Church. I also learned from reading Paul's LinkedIn profile that he values the freedom that having lots of travel options allows, particularly walking and biking. And that value is at the heart of his vision for Falls Church. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
All right, well, thank you. And thanks everyone for having me here tonight. One of the reasons I got into city planning in the first place is actually the opportunity to engage with the community, find out what direction they want to go, and then help them make that happen. So conversations like this really are valuable to me. I think certainly to the planning profession, but also just to me in sort of my sort of personal journey through city planning. So thank you. But with that, I want to pull my slides up on the screen. I did this earlier and now I'll try for it again. And then I hit some buttons. There we go. All right. Can folks see this? Let's see. Oh, I saw a thumbs up. All right. So now slideshow from beginning. Sure. Let's enable all the content for this session. Let's find out what that means. All right, does that still look normal to you or does it look weird to you? Are you seeing 2 slides or 1 slide?
Looks good. We see the title slide big and then the agenda slide a little smaller.
Oh, all right, all right. I'm always surprised on sort of what slides do, but I'll roll with it in this view if it's not too distracting for everybody. The slides take about 25 minutes to work through, and I'll try to keep an eye on my time, but certainly if I do start to drone on, please let me know and I can obviously wrap up. So this is going to be a 5-year outlook for development in terms of real estate development, what's going on with the big projects, as well as some of the little ones, and then also transportation within the City of Falls Church. And it's really focused on the next 5 years, although there are a few projects that stretch beyond that. The reason for picking this time frame is that it gives a good trajectory of what's gonna happen in the community, but there's also some level of certainty with this time frame because it's private projects that already have their zoning and land use entitlements, are under construction, or it's transportation projects that are already funded. So what I'll go through, I'll talk first a little bit about where Falls Church is. I think most folks on the call could probably answer that, but I think it's helpful to set a level field so that we're all using the same terminology throughout the discussion. I'll talk a little about who actually makes up Falls Church. Certainly that's more important than the buildings that are there, sort of where it is within the region. And then I'll talk about the council's vision for the future of the city. And then I'll talk about the projects, what's going on recently, what's under construction now, and then what's going to come up in the next few years. So where is Falls Church? There's a sort of large map on the right and then a lot of words on the left. The map on the right is showing the DC region, and it's focused a little bit left of DC inside the Beltway, and so it can squarely show City of Falls Church, which is this green piece. I think everybody knows that. This is Falls Church here, about 2 square miles. And then all the labels that are around this show the other places throughout the region. not the big land areas, not the giant buildings, but the actual places where things happen that people call home, that they identify with. Places like Seven Corners, Tyson's, McLean, Annandale, Bailey's Crossroads. And right, the reason for showing this slide is to show that Falls Church is one of these very special places, and it's part of this network of things happening throughout the region. And of course, Falls Church is connected to all these by the transportation arteries within the region. So you've got transit connections, the orange and silver lines going through the East Falls Church Metro, the orange line through West Falls Church Metro. You've got the W&OD Trail running 40+ miles across the entire region, all the way out to Purcellville. And then, of course, the roads that people normally see on a map, the Beltway 495, 66, the toll road 267, and then the highways that go in and around the city, 7, 29, 50. And so it's really this constellation of places that's knit together by all these transportation options. And of course, the regional setting and the roads and the transit facilities and the bike trails that support that really is what supports life happening at the community level. And so this slide about who is Falls Church, right? It's about the people that live here and call it home. And there's a little snippet at the top, which I'll read out, which is from the council's vision. The city of Falls Church is a welcoming and inclusive community, a special place in the heart of Northern Virginia. And here are some images, just some of the great community events that happen throughout the city year in, year out. Festivals at the Eden Center, the Tanner Hill Music Festival, Easter egg roll at Cherry Hill, and of course the farmers market, which happens throughout the year. And that's just a selection of few. There's not enough room on the slide to show them all. And there are some numbers behind this as well. So it's the events that happen and then sort of the composition of the population and the households that live here. So this chart on the left, there's a bit going on in this chart, so I'll break it down. There are really sort of three pieces of information that are being shown. This uppermost bar or uppermost line, this is population in the city charted in 5-year increments from 2010 to 2030. And here's the community now in 2020 with a population of about 14,300 people. That's grown from 12,300 in 2010, and it's expected to climb to 18,200 by the year 2030. This second bar down, this is employment, which is now at about 11,800 in the city and expected to climb to 15,800. And then this darkest blue line down here is the number of households in this city, now just shy of 6,200 and expected to go just shy of 7,800 by the year 2030. So that's those are the numbers of population, employment, and household. And there's something changing with the household composition in the city. So when the city really had a housing boom in the 50s, a lot of those houses, a lot of those homes were single family homes. And that made sense. It was the age of the automobile with highway expansion going out, Capital Beltway coming online, and people really moving out of the density of the cities and finding the open space in the suburbs that was so welcome. And now, as a densification of the suburbs has matched with growing population throughout the region, there's a wider variety of housing types coming to the city, and that's reflected in the makeup of single family house versus homes that are in multifamily buildings. So as of 2019, there are about 2,400 single family houses within the city and about 3,100 homes in multifamily buildings with 20 or more units, right? Apartment, condo buildings. And then a sliver here, this 260 units is townhouses, quadplexes, duplexes, very slight sliver of the city's housing makeup. And then just to put up some more numbers, average household size in the city is about 2.31 people. And the median household income, half make more, half make less, is 146,000, which is really quite high in comparison to obviously national numbers, but even in comparison to regional numbers. So population growing, jobs growing, housing growing, it's important to have a plan for how this is going to work out, right? I'm a city planner, at least I think this is important. And so we do have a plan for planning. And this is a map of the city, which is shown on the left. And in these pastel colors are the city's planning opportunity areas. So these planning opportunity areas, POAs, were identified by the city council in their 1997 and 2005 comprehensive plans. and they were identifying the commercial areas in the city where typically the pace of reinvestment in the commercial areas is not what it could have been to support better city services, to keep pace with growing demands for services with a growing population. And so the council at the time was looking for ways to spur reinvestment in the commercial areas. And so they laid out these planning opportunity areas, and then beginning in 2012, staff and the city council started working on what are called small area plans. So they are long-range planning documents, a 20 to 40-year outlook, and they look at a particular geography with the city, about 10 square blocks, and they come up with a vision for the future, and then those plans identify all the pieces that would need to fall into place to make that happen, whether that's public investment, policy changes, zoning changes, private investment. How would that all fit together to make that vision happen? And I will make a plug for the city's planning staff here. To date, we've completed all these in-house, which is a little bit unusual for small area planning. Typically, jurisdictions pay hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to have consultants build these plans. We like to just do them in-house, get them done in about a year's time, and build on the relationship with the community that we have through meetings like this. This long link at the bottom here, this is a link to the city's website, fallschurchva.gov, and then a little page within that, this /1983/planning library. That'll provide you a link to the city's comprehensive plan, small area plans, master plans, student studies. If you're interested in policy and development, it's all on that link. So when you take all of those small area plans, the city's comprehensive plan, and you knit them all together into a single image, this is what you end up with. This is the, oh, hey, Henry.
Need help putting this back on.
Well, I'm happy to help with that. I'm on a presentation right now. Can I do that in a little bit? So this is the, sorry about that. So this is the vision for the future of the city. When you knit it all together, this is a graphic of the city showing this network. If you think about Frederick Law Homestead and this idea of this network of parks that courses throughout the city. Of course, this was a model he tried to bring through a lot of cities in the US, but this idea of not just individual parks scattered about, but actually a connected park system so that people can connect with nature in their everyday life. And really the city's comprehensive plan, the Parks for People chapter, identifies places like Broad Street, Washington Park, Maple. These things that people think of as streets are really deserving of being linear parks where you can connect to trees and seating and the rest of your community members. And then of course, obviously connecting all the great parks that the city already has. And then this model of concentrated investment within the commercial areas and then a relatively stable environment throughout the rest of the city. So that's what's shown here. It's visible on one of my screens here. I will read it out. This is the vision statement that's in the city's comprehensive plan. In the year 2040, the city of Falls Church is a welcoming and inclusive community, a special place in the heart of Northern Virginia. Involved citizens are key to the city's long-term success as a leader in education, environmental sustainability, multimodal transportation, and vibrant economic development. By investing in neighborhoods, community services and facilities, schools and parks, the city preserves small town character and history while honoring a deep commitment to progress in a growing community. The continual rejuvenation of robust commercial areas supports the city's high quality of life for all citizens. So now there's a transition, right? We've been talking about what's the region, who are the people making up the city, what's the vision for the future of the community. And now these next slides are going to transition from vision into what's actually happening on the ground in terms of public and private investment to make that happen. So again, this map is showing the city highlighted along the commercial corridors are those planning opportunity areas. And then all these various colors and boxes are showing different things. And I'm going to unpack it a little bit. So first, the blue buildings, this I think will help anchor the conversation. These are the civic buildings within the city, City Hall, which was recently invested in, the library at Park in Virginia, and then out on the western edge, the new high school. So those are the civic buildings, which hopefully provide geographic anchors for the conversation. The solid red boxes that are dotting the various corridors, those are the recently completed major redevelopments, things like the Spectrum building, the Pearson Square, the Byron, the Northgate. These are the large projects that often capture a lot of attention. The hashed red boxes, those are no less important. Earlier, I said little projects. There's not really a little project. It's a smaller level of investment, but can have just as much of an important impact on the community, right? Things like Northside Social, which provide these great community gathering spaces, or the remake of the Good Fortune Grocery in the Eden Center, the retrofitting to get the Aldi into the shopping center, or the new Southgate, with the scramble on what was previously just a surface parking lot. These are, of course, important investments in the community as well. The orange boxes are projects that are under construction. And the reason I show all these is I want to put these sort of investments into that larger picture, that larger frame. And again, I'll go back to some numbers here. The total land area within the city of Falls Church is about 1,400 acres. And then the land area within the city's revitalization districts is 300 acres. And all of these boxes that are highlighted here with the smaller scale reinvestments, the new projects that went up previously, the ones that are under construction now, all that acreage combined is about 94 acres. And the city has been, this is a chart that's looking back at about 22 years of investment at this point, and it's already looking forward a few years as well. So I think, and the reason for showing that is that often there's a concern when people say, gosh, the city's running out of land, or there's going to be no space left, or where are we going to put the next commercial building? And this graphic in no way should be taken to mean that the entirety of the city is going to become 7-story buildings. But it does speak to sort of the availability of land, given that it's been 22 years and about 94 acres has been touched. It's going to be a long time before the city, if it ever does, gets to that vision of redevelopment of all these places, or reinvestment in all these places. The other angle, because there is a lot of transportation focus in these slides, I bring up this quote. This was a piece that was published in the news press. It was written by Rob Puentes, who's one of the city's planning commissioners. He looked at some historical VDOT data. VDOT goes out and they count vehicles. That's what they do. They count vehicles that are passing through the city at key intersections and key points. So Rob looked at that data from 2007 to 2019, so that it was not impacted by changes resulting from the pandemic. And here were his findings. The state estimates the traffic volume dropped by a remarkable 9.3% from 2007 to 2019. We are seeing more than 50,000 fewer vehicles each day. And so even as the city was experiencing this redevelopment, reinvestment, population growth, actually the number of cars was doing the reverse. It was going down. And there are a couple different reasons why this could be. You would need more research to understand which one of these were in play, but some possible explanations. Number one is that people don't have to drive as much as they used to. That the grocery stores are now near at hand. Half the city is within a 10-minute walking distance of, half the city's population is within a 10-minute walking distance of the new Harris Teeter. There are more drugstores available that you could get to. There are now clothing shops. If you were a man looking to buy a shirt, until the Target moved in, you couldn't buy one in the city unless you ordered it online. And so the availability of goods and services within the city mean local residents don't need to travel as far. It also means there's also this phenomenon that local traffic tends to displace regional traffic. So back in the 80s and 90s, if you were looking for a way to get from the west to the east, Falls Church was very attractive. You go right through. But now with development and the level of vibrancy, the level of pedestrian and bicycle traffic that's happening in the city, Falls Church is not as attractive a cut through as it used to be. And so you can find that regional traffic moving around the city instead of through the city. And like I said, I don't know, to what level and to what extent all those are in play, but certainly some possibilities. So now I'm going to step it down another level of detail, moving from the bigger picture of the vision to the sort of fabric of projects to now the individual projects. So I'm going to walk through each of these in turn, but really what this is intended to show is the variety of projects that are taking place, whether they're public, private, or transportation projects. So Founders Row, I think most folks are probably familiar with this one. This is at the corner of Broad and West Street, where residential leasing began back in 2021, last year in 2021. It's a 4.3 acre project, and the floor area ratio, FAR, that's a term that's going to pop up on a lot of these slides. For folks that don't know, floor area ratio is comparing how much floor area is inside the building or buildings to how much ground area is there on the site. So if you had a 1-story building that occupied the entire site, that's a floor area ratio of 1. If you had a 2-story building, that's a 2. And so what happens is when you start to have a mix of sort of open space and taller floors, that FAR becomes a convenient way to compare densities across projects. And of course, there's a mix of uses in here. There's the commercial spaces, the 95,000 square feet, which includes the new movie theater, and then the residential units above that support the economics. And of course, that comes in a mix of units. There's the 322 general units, the 72 age restricted units, and then 27 committed affordable dwelling units. Jumping out to the West End, you've got the Meridian High School, which was completed in late 2021. And of course, that was a voter approved, there was the voter approved referendum to invest the $120 million to make that new high school happen. And of course, a lot of good things came with that, the capacity for 1,500 students, the LEED Gold certification, and being net zero ready, which is obviously important for the future. And then West End development, of course, when you're going to spend $120 million on a high school, you need to find a way to pay for that. Right in that $120 million, putting that in comparison, right, the city's total budget every year for public goods and services, right, both operating and capital, is in the $100 million range. So finding a way to pay for that $120 million is important. And a bulk of that is going to be carried by the neighboring West End development. Phase 1 is under construction now, scheduled to open in 2024, with phase 2 coming online in 2028. And a mix of uses to really turn this into an 18-hour-a-day community with a new grocery store, housing, the retail, and the park's sort of main shopping street, which is shown in the lower picture on the right. And then, of course, a hotel and office uses to continue supporting the city's economy. The Broad and Washington project, also under construction now. This one has a much more visible hole in the ground than the West End. The estimated opening time is between 2024 and 2025. And here the floor area ratio of about 3, so a little bit denser than Founders Row. And of course, the commercial anchor here is the new Whole Foods that'll occupy the corner space adjacent to the new plaza that goes in on the corner. And again, residential units above to support the economics. This is Columbia Baptist taking a turn on North Washington and headed towards Arlington County at the corner with Columbia. This is a project, probably you haven't seen it in this finished state. It's had various pieces of building material attached to make it happen, whether it's the bricks or the weatherproofing, but eventually the finished materials will go up. And this is a new assembly hall being expanded onto the church. And it's always good to see these civic institutions within a community growing. And they're expecting, the earliest expected completion date is in 2023. Of course, no project is without hitches, and I'm sure they wish they were already done, but hopefully they'll wrap up soon. So moving from real estate to transportation, this is the South Washington project that people have seen come online recently, which the bulk of the construction was wrapped up in June of this year. And this was not an inexpensive project. It used a number of federal and state funding sources and regional funding sources, ultimately investing about $9 million plus another 2.7, so somewhere in the $12 million range to make this project happen. But that included a full suite of transportation facilities, better transit connections, better pedestrian and bicycle connections, and of course, automobile capacity was maintained throughout the corridor. And it invested also in the I think people sometimes look at trees and say, well, gosh, don't they look nice? But they're actually a pretty sort of critical function of a pedestrian and bicycle network. That those trees provide a sense of scale, they provide shade, they make it habitable in the summer months. They also cause people who are driving to slow down a little bit and take a little more notice. So it's an aesthetic feature, it's a stormwater management feature, it's a safety feature, and so it all has to come together to make a complete facility. Another nice thing that was highlighted in this project, well, it's a nice part of the project. It was a highlighting of the civil rights history of the Tinner Hill area and neighborhoods along the South Washington, as well as Hillwood Avenue corridors. And then an end cap on that project, the recent signal that'll be opened up here at South Maple in Washington, facilitating, of course, left turns for autos in and out of Maple Avenue, but also supporting a pedestrian connection between the north and south sides of South Maple Avenue, and doing a nice job of connecting Falls Church to Fairfax County. WNOD Dual Trails, this was a partnership project. So this was carried out by Nova Parks, the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority. It was funded by the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, the NVTA, and the city had a role in approving the site plan and also facilitating the application for the grant funds and overseeing the appropriateness of their use. It opened up in 2021, and it was a 1.5 mile stretch of dual trails, separated trails for folks on foot, folks on bike. And I think something that's a nice story to tell about the city's leadership in multimodal transportation is that the first paved mile of the WNOD happened here in the city of Falls Church, and now the first mile of dual trails on the WNOD happened here in the city of Falls Church. And just like that first mile of the WNOD paved the way for the rest of the WNOD, dual trails is also taking hold as other jurisdictions are taking notice. So this is moving from what's happening now to what's scheduled to happen in the future. And as I mentioned, these are generally, there's one exception here, but these are generally projects that are already approved, whether they've got their zoning entitlements or their grant funding, or they're in the city's capital improvement program. So these are things that can largely be expected to happen, with one exception, One City Center. And I'll talk about that one as I get to that slide. So Founders Row 2, this is at the corner of Broad Street and West. It's catty corner to Founders Row 1. So this is on the site of what's currently sometimes it's cabinet store, sometimes it's carpet store, and then the closed Rite Aid. So it's about a 2-acre project, and really where Founders Row 1 focuses on regional draws, the movie theater, high profile dining. These commercial offerings are really going to focus on the neighborhood serving level. The south side of Broad Street, especially on this end of the city, doesn't have as many neighborhood supporting commercial activities. And so this is going to include a lot of things that cater more to everyday needs. So everyday restaurants, as well as 3 sort of plaza areas throughout the projects, one at the corner with West, mid-block on West, and then down at the corner with, and I say down because the grade changes, at the corner with Ellison, to provide places not just to go and buy things, but also places to sit and relax and be with your neighbors. One City Center, so this one is under consideration. The application was filed in 2021, but it hasn't been approved yet. So that's still under review. And there's a couple things happening here. It's a pretty big footprint for a project. In total, the site area is about 4.63 acres. The existing George Mason Square office building, which is shown in the upper picture on the right, that would remain as well. The interior of the building would remain as is. And then what's proposed is modest investments in the facade of the building. The 150 South Washington building, which is the sort of white and black office building to its south, would remain, but also with some investments in the facade. What would change about the site is that a new parking garage would take the place of the old one, and then a new building would be constructed where the Matt's Taylor, the old BB&T, and then along the length of South Maple, coming sort of south of Broad Street. So the existing commercial would remain 126,000 square feet in those two existing buildings. And then new commercial spaces on the first and second floor would be added, about 100,000 square feet, and then residential above that. So now moving to civic investments, hopefully people on the call have had the chance to enjoy Mr. Brown's Park. It's been open for a couple of years, and really it's become this great little sort of hive of activity, right? With people, whether they're going to the programmed events or whether they're getting an ice cream cone next door, or where they're just spending time with their friends and family right in the middle of the city. And so the idea is to continue on that trend and construct parklets, these small plazas where you've got what has otherwise become sort of an overlooked space, and invest in that and make it an attractive spot. And so there are federal ARPA dollars, which are being overseen by the Economic Development Authority, the city's Economic Development Authority. And they've endorsed the use of these funds for 3 new plazas throughout the city at the corners, corner of South Washington and Annandale. Then at what's labeled here is Hillwood Alley. It's that space next to the eye doctor's office at Hillwood and South Washington, and then down at the corner of Washington and Maple. Park Avenue, great streets. I think the walking tour for this one is actually what served as the catalyst for this call tonight. But this was a project that was long in the works, going back to the adoption of the city's Mobility for All Modes plan. Back in 2014 was the identification of Park Avenue as one of the city's civic great streets, the place where the Memorial Day parade happens, the place where the city's library is, City Hall, the State Theater, which has been there for years and years and years and years. And of course, on the other end, connecting to the WNOD, and we've already talked about that as being one of the great ped bike trails throughout the region. And so really Park Ave was seen as one of these places where lots of great things are already happening, and shouldn't the public realm, the investment and the design, the facility, the materials really reflect everything that happens along the corridor. And so there are a number of things proposed to improve the look and feel and operation of the street, gateway features at either end, better entrance to Cherry Hill Park, the addition of 30 plus canopy trees along the street, undergrounding of utility lines, adjusting the intersection geometry to make it a little bit easier for drivers to navigate, and also a lot safer for pedestrians to walk, and raised crossings as well. Broad Street improvements, I don't know how well this shows up in the slides, but there are a series of improvements that are funded along Broad Street to make it a more walkable place. So Broad Street already does a pretty good job of, well, depending on your time of day, it does a pretty good job of moving people who are driving or even people who are walking sort of east-west throughout the city. But if you're on foot, getting north-south across Broad Street can be quite a challenge. And this was identified in the ped bike study, which unfortunately didn't go through all those years ago. The comprehensive plan, the small area plans, it keeps showing up as an issue that it's hard to walk from one side of Broad Street to the other. And so there is grant funding that's been approved to install what are called hawk signals. They sort of look like a traffic signal. They arc over the street and they operate a sort of a modified traffic signal. And so those are funded for key intersections where there's already a lot of pedestrian usage or where there's a pretty long gap between signalized crossings. So at Broad and Oak, next to the Solace Brewery and the Spectrum building, at Broad and Fairfax, and then also at Broad and Berry on the east end of the city. Annandale, so this one is also in the city's capital improvement program and funded by outside grants, but it's a redo of the intersection of Washington and Annandale, which seems to see some of the highest rates of auto crashes, and it's pretty daunting as a pedestrian. And so the project proposes coming in and sort of remaking that intersection to be safer for folks who are driving, safer for folks who are walking, and make it look like the rest of the city with things like street trees and decorative materials in the crosswalks and the sidewalks. And then continuing along Washington, out along right where Washington is split between the city and the county, but investing in both sides of the street, obviously, but further investing in transit facilities and pedestrian facilities in the city with updated crosswalks, updated geometry, and new bus shelters. WNOD trail crossings. This actually, and I apologize, the image in the upper right is not reflecting the right spot. The crossings are where they always are at Little Falls, Spring, Oak, and Great Falls. So the idea is to match the style of the crossing to the dual trails. So if you can see the sort of typical example in the larger picture, the street is going north-south, and then the dual trails are going east-west. And so there's one crosswalk called out for folks on bikes, one crosswalk for folks who are on foot. And then there are special materials used throughout the length of the WNOD. The WNOD is not just the two trails. It's actually 100 feet wide for almost its entirety from Arlington to Purcellville. And so the special materials are intended to be used throughout that entire width of the park. So that people really have a sense that when you're on these street crossings, you really are in a park space. Shreve Road connection. This is further investment to make sure people have a lot of safe ways to get to the west end of the city. It's a little hard to see with the highlighting, but the WNOD is sort of the neon green line that's diagonally along the bottom of the screen. The West End project is that sort of gray and peach sort of area in the middle of the project. And then there's this red box that's along Shreve Road. And so the idea is to take what is today maybe 3-4 feet of asphalt and concrete to make that connection from the WNOD to the West End project, expand that so that it's a proper 10 feet wide to make it a true mixed use trail, add lighting so that people can use it at any time of day, and provide curb and gutter so that gravel and mud don't wash up on the trail from the roadway. And so that wraps up the walkthrough of the projects that are either in progress or scheduled to happen in the near future. And I just want to close, right, because all of these pieces come together to make that vision happen. And again, this goes back to the council's 2040 vision for the future of the community, with this idea of concentrated reinvestment within the commercial areas, supported, of course, by a network of green spaces, and of course, all the people that actually call City of Falls Church home. And so with that, I'll wrap it up there, and I'm happy to take questions.
So the city has talked a lot about equity in different areas, and I'm wondering how you see that, do we need to just still do better on that? Is that part of your 5-year planning? Will you speak to kind of how you've thought about equity and hopefully incorporate it into some of the future plans, or all of the future plans?
Sure. So you asked about equity. I think, and there are a lot of different angles on that. I think there's sort of an equity in transportation. There's an equity in housing. There's an equity in employment. There are a lot of different angles you could take. I'll speak to some, and I'm happy to speak to more. I think the housing front is probably the one that's foremost on folks' mind. There's a pretty big gap. We found this when we were updating the demographics chapter as well as the housing chapter of the city's comprehensive plan. If you are a resident, if you're a resident of the city and you're employed, then your median annual income is something like $66,000. Of course, household income's higher. And if you work in the city, and you could live anywhere within the region, then your median income is only about $30-something thousand. And so there's a big gap between the folks who sort of live here and the folks who work here. And so you have seen a shift in that conversation. Council's put a lot of emphasis recently on providing affordable housing options here in the city. So that's been renegotiating with developers to get not 6% of the units as committed affordable, but 10% of the units as committed affordable, and working with the housing staff to understand where is the greatest need for housing units. It's for working professionals that are single or maybe married without kids, it's in those smaller format units. So that's, and then for families, it's in the bigger sort of multi-bedroom units. And so really targeting those negotiations to be either the bigger units to support families or the smaller units to support households without kids. And then there's also been the investment of public dollars and EDA dollars to secure the quadplexes throughout Virginia Village, and the use of the Amazon housing funds to renegotiate terms on ADUs that were expiring, or to buy more of the quadplexes and secure the affordability of those for the long term. And so there is movement on a couple different fronts on housing equity. And then transportation equity, I think the emphasis on ped bike connectivity and trying to make sure that people can get around regardless of age or ability. I think sometimes people think of driving as the default, but actually driving is only the default if you have access to a car, if you're able-bodied, if you're even licensed to drive. And so the ability to expand walking and biking. So, anyone under the age of 16 suddenly has their travel options expand, or folks who aren't comfortable or aren't able to drive anymore, or people who can't afford to own a car. There are a lot of different angles you could take on the equity conversation. That's two of them. Happy to go more if you want me to talk about that.
So since you mentioned affordable housing, I think maybe a natural segue to a similar topic is, are there any efforts that are underway to increase the number or increase home ownership here in Falls Church?
Ooh, home ownership. So yes. So home ownership is, and probably the reason for asking it, right, is one, home ownership gives you a sense of stability that you own the place where you're living, but also it's a wealth generator, right? You hold the home for long enough and it's worth more than it was when you bought it. There are efforts underway, again, supported by grant funds. The housing staff is working on a home ownership affordability program. I can speak to it in general. I don't know the specifics of it, but in general, the way it would work is that the city would go out and buy housing units at market rate. And then it would turn around and sell those with a covenant at a reduced rate based on income limitations. And so it would give that opportunity for home ownership for someone to move in, and then the covenant would be structured so that there'd be a recapture of some of that value. And so in essence, it becomes a revolving fund where the city's using money to buy houses, selling them at a reduced rate, and then using the immediate proceeds to buy more houses. And then also when eventually those homes sell, using the value sort of captured there to again support the revolving fund.
Excellent. I'm going to admit that I had some folks from the group send me their questions ahead of time. So anyone can feel free to jump in, but if no one else is, I will go ahead and pose the questions that were sent to me by the group.
I do see a hand raised. I don't know if you want to take, I don't know how you want to manage.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sandy, I see you have a hand raised.
Okay, I've unmuted. Hi, Paul.
Hi.
This was great and really comprehensive. So I want to go back to what they're doing at the crossings of the W and OD trail.
Yeah.
So is the purpose of that to just let drivers know they're coming up to a cross in that? Or I find those intersections a little bit scary because bikes never stop. And I don't know whether they actually have the right of way or they just take the right of way. I mean, I come almost to a complete stop when I get to that trail because I never know what I'm going to find flying by.
Right.
So how are those intersections organized or planning to be organized?
Yeah, they can be tricky to navigate. So I'm sort of in your boat that I typically come to sort of a crawl or a halt just to make sure I have a full sense of what's going on. So right now the way the traffic controls that are in place right now is technically there is a stop sign for folks who are on bike on the trail, and Nova Parks, who owns and operates the trail, likes that configuration. That's what they use along the length of the trail, and they see a value in consistency. Currently, the auto traffic on the street operates without a stop sign. So in theory, the folks on bikes are supposed to stop. Although I agree with you, they don't always. And then in theory, I guess that would give right away to the folks in the cars. But at the same time, right, if someone's on foot, then they've got the right of way. So it's a confusing thing. And so part of what the design was trying to get at here was just to slow everybody down. Because if everyone's going sort of 5-10 miles an hour, then obviously the pedestrians aren't going that fast. But if everyone's going 5-10 miles an hour, everybody can see each other better. You can make better eye contact. You can just sort of have that human experience and sort of navigate the space with no one getting hurt and no one showing, hand gestures. And so part of that was just sort of the emphasis of let's get everybody to slow down. And then also, it's funny, people often think about this as the trail crossing, right? But if you go back to sort of the old days when this was a railroad, the train didn't stop for the cars, right? That's just not what they do. And in fact, the Nova Parks actually owns all this land, and the city street exists by an easement. So the auto traffic is there by permission, not by right. And so that's also what this design is trying to emphasize. And this mock-up doesn't actually do it justice. We were able to work with designers. Those flat green patches are going to be sort of continue that meadow mix that was planted throughout the entire WNOD to really get back at a natural restoration of what was there in terms of a functioning ecosystem.
So just so I understand this drawing, the part that has the brown in it, that's the dual bike trail.
Yeah, let me walk you through. It's a little tricky to see in the rendering. So can folks see my mouse cursor when I use it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so this piece here is actually the street. So in this case, there's So in this case, there's a median in the middle of the street. So auto traffic would pass, upbound traffic would pass on this side of the median, downbound traffic would be on this side. And then what's going across from the side to side is the pedestrian and bicycle traffic on the trail.
Okay, but that median and the different color of the pavement is what is letting a biker know that something's coming up here, or this intersection is coming up?
Right. Yeah. So all of this red becomes a stamped concrete with the color picked to match the brick paver crosswalks, but this isn't a stamped concrete. And then there's a little bit of gray here for the tactile warning surfaces. And then this green becomes, like I said, sort of part of that meadow mix. So there's a bit going on here, but when you have a better rendering, I think it does start to make a lot more sense.
Okay, any chance that gray part in the middle could be a small speed bump? That would slow bikes down a little.
Yeah, we've talked to Nova Parks about sort of traffic calming that you could do for the bike traffic, especially on the approaches. We had talked about things like slight curves or markings, not so much rumble strips because those can be tricky to navigate in a bike, but that's right. A conversation we can have with them again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I understand it a little more now.
Yep.
On the Shreve Road connection, that happens to be the next slide. Are there going to be any improvements to the intersection? I mean, I find when I'm on that, I mean, the narrow path is actually okay because it's not populated. It's like always a shock when I see somebody else actually walking or biking on there because it's not very well used. But then I find that connection to the intersection is where, there are cars turning right that never look at pedestrians, and, it's just a very messy intersection kind of right there, where Lazy Mike's is now.
Right. Yeah, that's an intersection that I know a lot of folks are concerned about. It's a big intersection, and it is sort of a significant barrier it's a significant barrier, sort of getting from the city to obviously the development, but I think more importantly on people's mind, getting to the high school and the middle school. And so some of the intersection does get repaired and redone. In addition to the private development that's happening on that 9.5-ish acres. Again, Northern Virginia Transportation Authority investing money in multimodal. They're investing $15.7 million in the multimodal facilities, including a redo of that intersection. So the crosswalks are going to be straightened out. The ramps are going to be updated. The sidewalks are going to be, the crosswalks are going to be widened to a full 10 feet on all 4 legs.
What does
So
that mean? The ramps are going to be. What do you mean by the ramps? I'm trying to.
Oh, I'm sorry. The accessibility ramps, like the crosswalk ramps, where they're maybe pointed into the intersection, are actually going to be pointed properly at the crosswalks. So it'll be easier for folks to find their way to the crosswalk and use it. So there is some investment happening there. And the final design of that continues to be sort of under review. There is sort of an approved version on the books, and then people are looking for ways to make it better. The other advantage that'll come with the rest of this project is that not everyone will have to cross at that signal anymore. So you don't necessarily have to double cross, right? As part of the West End project, not only is there the redo at the signal at 7 and Haycock, but also new signals added, sort of one to the north along Haycock and then one to the west along Broad. And so there are more ways to get across the street than there used to be.
And just going back to that Shreve Road connection, I mean, the other thing that makes it, I think, hard as a pedestrian or a biker is you kind of have that wall next to where Lazy Mike's is, and it just, you kind of, I don't know, I always feel like I'm going to crash into it, even if I'm going at a very reasonable pace. Is that going to be addressed, or is that just there forever because it's concrete and it's?
Yeah, we're out. So we're partnering with Fairfax County on the implementation. They have staff available to move it a little faster. And so they're already getting started with things like survey work and getting their design consultants on board. That is one of the things we're trying to figure out is how do we get to that full 10-foot width. There's an example sort of cross section that I have in mind. I don't know if there's BDOT's been doing some work along 50 in Arlington. If you where sort of Fillmore and 50 come together, there's a new 10-foot trail along the south side of Route 50. It's actually part of a larger vision of connecting a ped bike trail all the way from DC to City of Fairfax. But anyway, they've got a nice 10-foot cross section there if folks happen to be over that way. And it shows how you really can make a much more comfortable experience with a little bit of separation and a wider trail and nice crosswalks. But the mechanics of how it all fits in, we probably won't know that until the survey work and the sort of 30% designs come in.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So I will go ahead and interject this question. I think this is a good one. I just lost it. So the Falls Church has approved many of the mixed use projects in recent years, and it looks like some of the projects are having trouble finding commercial tenants for that first floor space. And so what is your assessment of that? And is the demand for the amount of commercial spaces being created being met?
Yeah, so the question is sort of, are the commercial spaces able to be sort of successfully leased up? So one thing that's sort of worth noting is that the vacancy rate in Falls Church is lower than everywhere else in the region. So the commercial space that the city does have leases at a much higher rate occupancy wise than the rest of the region. Especially for sort of general retail spaces. Some of that is the cost, where you've got older spaces that are easier to make the rent payments on. But I think a lot of it is the location, just the amount of, right, you do have a high household income, you do have a fair amount of through traffic, you've got got local foot traffic. So there are a lot of different users of those commercial spaces, which makes it attractive. And of course, it's inside the Beltway, so it's in a good spot and it's on the way to a lot of things. The new spaces, things like Founders Row, where that space remains vacant, I think some of that is trying to just get the best retail tenants in there that they can, and working toward the best deal they can get. Some of that is also wanting to be able to show probably that they've got the theater online, which of course makes it a more attractive place for a commercial tenant to be. So sometimes it's just waiting for the entire project to come together. I think is why Founders Row looks the way it does. I will say I think the council negotiated stronger terms for Founders Row 2. So as Founders Row 2 comes online, the same developer actually has commitments not only to have the empty commercial spaces, but actually start fitting out those commercial spaces and signing leases in line with leasing the residential units. So it means they can't necessarily wait for the best commercial rates. And they will be sort of compelled to move along, even if it means not the best deal for them.
Martha, did you want to raise a question?
Yes, I would like to. My question is about the bump outs that are proposed at Maple and Park. And I don't see how bicycles are supposed to be part of that picture with the bump outs. So can you please describe how bicycles get to manage it?
Yeah, there are. So it's right. It's obviously been a topic that's come up in a lot of venues, and of course, on Tuesday night, just 2 nights ago, right, a lot of comments at the council session about how to accommodate folks on bikes along Park Avenue. And I keep using sort of that longer term folks on bike, folks on foot, right? Because what I want to sort of keep remembering is that it's really people at the end of the day trying to get from where they are to where they want to be, right? So they're not really a bike, they're not really a car, they're actually a person that maybe is on a bike or in a car, or wearing a pair of shoes. So they're right, they're not those things. They're still people underneath it all. So a couple different thoughts on this. So when you've got right on a slower speed street, there is some design guidance that says if the street is going at a slow enough speed, really the safest place can be for the folks on bikes to actually just be in the general travel lane, sort of sharing that space with cars. Obviously, not a lot of people are not always comfortable with that, and you may not feel safe, sending your kid out in that kind of situation as well. And so a lot of people sort of are looking for that bike lane or even that protected bike lane. The bulb outs as they're currently shown, the curb extensions as they're currently shown, don't accommodate a bike lane. I think part of the conversation that sometimes gets wrapped up is that many city streets, right, like West, like Park, like other big streets throughout the city have an on-street parking lane, but it's not always used very much. Or not at certain times of day anyway. And so people sort of use that parking lane as a de facto bike lane. And so then there's this confusion about, well, gosh, all of a sudden there's this curb extension, it's blocking the bike lane. Well, it wasn't actually a bike lane, it was a parking lane. So a lot of things are coming into play. There is, when there isn't a designated bike lane, really where you want that person on a bike is actually smack in the middle of the travel lane. You want to discourage drivers from sort of racing around people on bike or sandwiching them in between their car and a parked car. So a lot of the design guidance that's out there for the 30% designs for Park Avenue is actually to get folks on bikes right in the middle of the travel lane, so that just everyone slows down. Right, after all, it's one of the city's civic rate streets, and it's not that long, so if you only get to go 10 miles an hour for a few blocks of city street, that's probably not such a bad thing in the overall course of your day.
So it is 8:28. I think we planned this for an hour. If anybody has any pressing questions for Paul that they haven't had answered, I think we probably have time. Phil, did you have a comment?
I just had a question. Paul, at the very beginning, thank you. I don't want to bump anybody else off, but if all others have asked their questions. At the beginning, you said that our vision is to promote economic investment in sort of the concentrated commercial areas of the city, while leaving a more stable environment in the rest of the city. That rest of the city is where a lot of the anxiety is emanating from, I perceive. Just wonder what you think about, whether it's a discussion about speed limits on residential streets, or, converting parking to bike lanes, or prohibiting business parking in neighborhood streets in a variety of ways. That rest of city, cutting down trees to build much larger houses. What, when you come to work every day, do you allocate in terms of your time and thought to the rest of the city environment?
Yeah, a lot of the small area plans, right, they're focused on those commercial areas, but there's also, you're right, there's a lot of energy that goes into sort of neighborhood planning, sort of what happens in those areas outside of the commercial districts. And credit the council here, they've invested in the neighborhood traffic calming program. They invested some of the ARPA dollars to support a lowering of the speed limits. They continue to invest park dollars to make the green spaces within the city nicer. What else is there? There's, and then the negotiated terms. Whenever a development does go in adjacent to an existing single family neighborhood, there's an emphasis on how is construction traffic going to be managed. And of course, that's an ongoing process. And then also, how is the parking going to be managed once the building is up and operating? So there are a lot of pieces that go into it, and trying to the extent possible, make sure that sort of, the way things work today is the way they're going to work tomorrow. Of course, at the same time, there are, efforts underfoot. It's on the council's work plan to look at accessory dwelling units. Can you do more with a single piece of land than you could today? I think, the way the status quo is set, when someone's looking to retire, move out of the city, cash out on an investment they made in buying a house in the community, usually the default option for the older homes is to actually tear it down and building something much, much bigger. And that comes with the clear cutting of land, the removal of all the mature trees. I think the statistic was a little bit old, but I think, it's somewhere between like 15 and 20 teardowns every year across the city. And that works out to about 4 or 5 acres of land that's being redeveloped in the single family areas every year. And that's a significant loss to the city's mature tree canopy. And so, can you find other investment alternatives for those properties? Can you allow people to have an accessory dwelling or a second home? Especially if it's done in a way that can hold on to the existing structure, the look of it from the street, the tree canopy that supports the rest of the neighborhood. So looking at ways to allow for reinvestment without having to sort of tear the whole thing down.
Right.
Thank
I think there's one more question from Dave.
Sure. Hi, Paul. Fantastic presentation. Thank you. 2 questions. One that you sort of just touched on. I know from my stormwater work, one of the things that it kind of keeps me up at night was I think as of 2012, the city is effectively 42% impervious, and as we grow more and as more redevelopment happens at the I'm less concerned about the kind of the commercial redevelopment, because so much is happening with putting the storage tanks beneath those big buildings. But I'm just kind of curious for your thoughts on, like, as the price of the land goes up and as we do more redevelopment citywide, like, do we need to be putting a cap on the effective level of impervious surface of the borders of the city?
So single family does have an impervious cap today, and I'd have to double check the books, but it's somewhere in that 30-ish% range. So there is an impervious cap today. It can be a little difficult to administer because there are only certain things that trigger that calculation. But there is a cap in place. but you could ask sort of whether that's the right cap, whether it should be different. The other angle is sort of, well, is it impervious surface? Is it tree canopy? And usually my angle on these kinds of things is that sort of regulating things, not to say it shouldn't happen, but regulating things is difficult because you set up sort of this adversarial system where people are trying to get away with as much as you can, and then you got to send sort of the city vehicle out there, and then everyone hates the city vehicle. And so can you set this up in a way where there's actually an incentive program, right? So can you set this up so that people are incentivized to actually have more trees so that they actually serve as sort of a rain sink, and they can support the entire neighborhood? What's happening now with the greening of Lincoln Avenue project, where street trees are being added to the right of way. Right of way is still one of the areas where you could most easily add trees. It's publicly owned, and it's almost totally impervious. So this idea of updating the city's design standards to have green pieces built into it, whether that's trees or bioswales, you can see nice examples of this throughout the region. And so really just thinking of it as sort of a philosophy of one project needs to do more than one thing, right? It needs to provide pedestrian safety, auto throughput, stormwater capture, public art, right? It ought to do all these things at one time. Usually it's, on a per piece basis, it's usually cheaper if you can get it all done at once, so long as you don't bog the whole thing down and it takes forever to get done.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, I, for one, really enjoyed this presentation, and I thought we got some really good questions at the end. So I think I can probably speak on behalf of the League of Women Voters to say thank you very much for taking the time to do this, Paul. We really value the time you spent to, talk with us, and we welcome, another conversation just like this.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Like I said, getting out and talking to community groups is also, always a wonderful experience, right? And what better place to do it than the League of Women Voters. So thank you very much.